Where did we get all of the information we have on Rome?
There's many different places.
Okay.
I think we could start by talking about what are called the literary sources, which is collections of either Latin histories or Greek histories that were written at the time. And again, like when I say at the time, and I'll just keep going back to Livy. Livy was writing at the time, but he's telling us about events from 200 years earlier, 400 years earlier, 600 years earlier. So it's not really a contemporary history, but he's a huge source of information.
Sorry to interrupt you, but why weren't there histories at the time?
Some of them were,
Okay.
and the ones that we like a lot are the ones that are written very close to events. Like there's a guy called Sallust who wrote a couple of histories where he is writing about events very near to his own lifetime, where he is able to talk to people who were there at the time. And he himself was a political actor. He was in Caesar's faction during the wars. And so some of what he's writing about happened at the time. Polybius definitely gets into stuff that happened in his own lifetime. And then sort of off of Rome, there's a great history of the Peloponnesian War by Thucydides, who's one of the main sort of architects of what we think of as history. And he was definitely like, you can't write about history if you can't talk to people who were there. Like that was his theory. So there is sort of two branches of the literary sources. Most of the literary sources that existed have been lost. We are dealing with a microscopic fraction of what actually existed at the time. And the thing that is very frustrating is like, we know that there were these great histories that were written that are referenced by other historians. And you're like, God, if we could just get a hold of that. Oh my God. I mean, the great white whale is the Emperor Claudius wrote, he comes from the Julio-Claudian dynasty. And he wrote a history of the civil wars that put the Julio-Claudian dynasty in power.
Wow.
That was allegedly subsequently destroyed. For what reason? Because it was too honest and it was too truthful. And so like, oh man, Claudius's history of how the Julio-Claudians got into power, like I would love to have a piece of that. But so we only have like a microscopic amount, and this stuff is like, how did it get to us? It's like, it's stuff that winds up in like monasteries, like monks are copying this stuff down and forwarding it along. Things are just like found randomly in libraries. So those are the literary sources. And then we supplement that with a lot of archaeology and analysis of material culture, because there are limits to what the literary sources can tell us. And this is how we know more about how they lived like on a daily basis, because we've got pottery, we've got, different, how did their furnaces run? Like how did their ovens run? Like all of this stuff is coming from archaeology. In Roman history in particular, we also do a lot of study of coins, because they were constantly pumping out coins, and coins were a means of sort of universalizing, you could call it propaganda, but like messages that the emperor or the state wanted to put out there. And
like that was a big thing. If you started to get some control, you'd have a coin almost. It was
the thing, like you could almost say that like, what did it mean to be the Roman emperor? And there are lots of different sort of things that means. The main thing it means is that your face is on the money. And your face goes on the money. And when we talk about like people rising up and trying to usurp like rival emperors, like there's always this point where they start minting their own coins with their own face on it. And that's, okay, now we've got a viable dude here because he's got control of a mint.
Right. Instead of show me the money, it's like show the money me.
Show the money to the people. And it's always stuff like, I love the army, and then they bump out all these coins, and then the army's like, oh, he loves us, maybe we should support him.
Oh, they would put little slogans on them.
Yeah, and they had all this like shorthand for like what different symbols meant, and they would recognize these things, like Romans would recognize these things at the time. Where these days you got to be an expert to really like decode what's going on these coins, but
they had slang at the time almost,
yeah.
Or like almost not emojis, but
I mean, emojis isn't far gone. I mean, it's iconography, and this emojis are just iconography. And there's also changes in like sort of how the faces are depicted, depending on what era of Roman history we're into. And so people can spend their entire lives just studying like Roman coinage. But those are roughly like the three main pillars of then how we know things about the Roman Empire.
How much of ancient history from Rome is factual, do you think, or how much was adjusted to make things look a certain way?
That's I don't know what percentage I could give on things. How much of it is true? Like some of it for sure, because we can independently verify it from inscriptions and from other sort of physical evidence. But like I said at the beginning, what the Roman and Greek historians were mostly interested in was telling these morality tales about how to live how to live in contemporary society, rather than sort of fidelity to the objective truth. Like, this is what really happened. Now, that said, they cared a lot about, like, they were looking through documents the same way that historians do today. Polybius is interviewing people. He's looking at documents, and they are trying to tell a correct story. I think that they're definitely trying to do it. But if the sort of morality tale runs into the facts, like which is going to win, they're going to massage it towards the morality tale. And then you have to sit down and you have to ask yourself, okay, well, where did this person come from? What is their own social position? What is their own family connections? For some reason, we keep going back to Livy because he's just apparently on the forefront of my mind. But there's a description of the Battle of Cannae, which is
Cannae,
Cannae.
Okay.
And this is one of the greatest defeats in Roman history. This is Hannibal is defeating the Romans. He just absolutely wipes them out. And this is during the Second Punic War. And the story that Livy tells is about one particular Roman consul who was basically an idiot and caused all of this to happen, right? The one consul did not want to go into battle. The other consul did want to go into battle, and they alternated days of who was in charge, right? So it's like, I'm in charge on Monday, you're in charge on Tuesday, I'm in charge on Wednesday. Yeah. And so the guy who was in charge on Wednesday was like, we're going into battle, and you couldn't argue with him because he was the consul and he was in charge that day. And then they get wiped out by Hannibal. And then you go look into Livy's past and his own family tree, and you find out that he's maybe trying to make one of his ancestors look better than they actually were. So this is actually, like, if you lean into it, it is a fun part of sort of deconstructing and decoding these things. If you really get into it, this stuff is fun. It's kind of, it's entertaining and it's interesting.
Because you have to examine the author and some of his motivations and how much would he be willing to adjust things and possibly why. Yep. And then you have to put that on the same scale, on the other side of the scale of the facts and information that you do have.
The book that I'm writing right now, which is about the crisis of the 3rd century, has like a missing battle that we have to contend with, where there's this huge inscription of these great Sassanid kings, this guy Shapur and Ardashir, who have this like huge monuments that were built to them. And then on the side of these cliffs, they etched in huge letters, like basically their resume, all of their accomplishments, all the things that they did. And one of the things references this battle where they defeated the Romans. And then you go look through the Roman historical record, and it's patchy at the time, right? This is one of the things about the crisis of the 3rd century is we don't have a ton of information because it was so chaotic. But we don't have any reference to this battle. And they're specifically referencing like which emperor was defeated. So it's like, who's lying? Are the Romans trying to cover up a defeat by not mentioning it? Or did this guy just make up a battle to tell his own people, look, I defeated the Romans this time too. And he did beat the Romans many times. Wow. Like we don't, and the thing is, we don't know. We absent a time machine, there's ambiguity in the historical record at all times. And this is, again, like when you become a real sicko for history, you stop needing history to be just an objective set of events. Like, just tell me what happened is something that, like, take out your ideological biases. Like, take this out. Like, just tell me the facts. That never happens, and it can never happen because humans are always going to be writing in their own subconscious biases when we pick and choose what information to share, when we pick and choose how to frame a certain event. Nobody can ever just sit down, even me, like, and as I'm just trying to tell you the facts of Roman history, of course my little biases are coming into it. Of course my opinions are coming into it. There's no sort of escaping that. And once you understand that it's inescapable, then it just becomes a layer to have an even greater understanding of the human condition and human society, which is, I think, what we're really after when we study history.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I was going to ask you kind of what makes a good historian, but obviously one of the things is being able to recognize that you're not going to be able to get something absolute because it's kind of impossible.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's impossible. Now, leading up to that, like, what makes a good historian Yeah, fidelity to the facts, fidelity to the sources. Like, don't say something if you don't have a source backing it up. Go to the primary sources, read those primary sources, try to present those sources in as accurate a way as possible. And so it's absolutely not the case that professional historians are just running around out there only publishing their biases, right? Only doing things in the service of their own political or social beliefs. Most historians, most of the time, are trying to do that project of like, I want to examine this, I want to examine the evidence, and I want to talk about it. It's just it's an impossible dream, but moving towards that dream in a way that is rooted in the facts is really important, and that does make a good historian for sure.
Yeah, we certainly got off that path in the past 20 years where it's like it felt like news outlets it used to feel like it was real information and it was factual and it wasn't biased. And then it went down this other road, it felt like, but then it's always been like, can you trust your government? Can you trust the reporting? Can you trust these, the councils that are running things, who can you trust, and it seems like from listening to you that that's kind of, it's always been some version of that.